I just want to welcome everyone to today's session. Good afternoon to most of the folks on the line today. I think there's some people internationally as well. Really heartened to see a great geographical distribution today. I saw folks from Canada, from Austria, from Jamaica even. So welcome again to today's Edulastic session. Before we start, I did want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in today and really getting to understand how to use Edulastic. I know that we're in a very precarious position right now. You know, there's a lot of unknowns facing educators. So we really appreciate all the educators today tuning into this Edulastic session. So let's go ahead and jump into today's session. I'm going to share my screen with folks on the line today. And let's go ahead and dive right into Edulastic. So it looks like from the poll that most folks on the line today are relatively new to Edulastic, which is perfect. You know, this Edulastic 101 training is really geared towards helping people understand how to use Edulastic and put it to use in your classroom. But if you're a seasoned veteran using Edulastic, you'll get a lot out of this as well today. So we welcome both the beginners and those that are a little bit more familiar with Edulastic. Now, for those that this is your first foray into Edulastic, the first thing you want to do is create a teacher account. I won't really get into that a whole lot, but if you go to the edulastic.com homepage here, what you want to do first is click on the Join for Free button, and that will then, a pop-up will appear where you can enter your name, email address, and then the school and district that you teach at. So that's really vitally important because what that does is it helps you get aligned to a school and district, and then your fellow colleagues can then share resources with you. So when you get the chance, maybe after this call, what you can do is you can go ahead and, if you haven't signed up already, go ahead and join for free, clicking this yellow button in the upper right corner. Now, Lauren had mentioned that we want to give folks a really comprehensive introduction to Edulastic today. So what I'm hoping to give you is a really soup to nuts look into everything Edulastic related. So not only from the student perspective, but also teacher perspective. So obviously, we want to get you familiar with how to create an assessment, how to look for content, and then ultimately how to look for the data behind what you've given to your kids. But before we jump into that portion, I did want to give a brief overview into the student's perspective of Edulastic. So, oftentimes this is a black box. Teachers don't really understand or see what kids see when they're using Edulastic. So I wanted to give folks a brief introduction at the very onset into what kids see on their end. So you'll see here that I'm signed into a student account. And the first thing you see is a collection of assignments that have been assigned to you as a student. So this tab called Assignments will then have all the assignments that are ready for you as a kid to take. Now, just quickly looking over some of the other tabs, Grades is a place where any past or previous assignments that have already been submitted and graded will then show up. But when they first sign in, they'll see all their assignments. And just quickly, I just want to remind folks that if there's any questions, feel free to type them into the chat window or raise your hand on Q&A. And Lauren and Bill will get to those questions. All right, so from the student side of things, when you first land in Edulastic, you'll see a place where it denotes the assignment that's meant to be taken. This one is called Beginning of Year Standards Assessment. You'll get a status bar that is either not started, completed, or in progress, and then the due date. So think of the due date as pencils down. Right when that due date hits, students are effectively locked out of the assessment, and they can no longer take any questions on the assessment. And when kids are ready, they can simply click on Start Assignment here off to the right, and they'll be taken directly into the assignment. Now, Edulastic, we're a formative assessment platform that addresses all different standards, all different question types. So whether you're an educator from, let's say, Massachusetts that takes MCAS, state standardized tests, or Texas STAR or Ohio AIR, there's all these different state standardized tests, along with, SBAC and PARC. we have a collection of question types that would help you get those kids prepared to take state standardized tests. So, they run the gamut from really basic multiple choice, multiple selection, to some of the more involved, math questions. For example, matrices. We have range plotter. We have, graphing parabolas, graphing inequalities. These are all available in Edulastic for you to assess your kids on. So as I go through this assessment, we'll be looking at different question types that are available to kids. This first one is a very simple fill in the blank. So it's asking us how many thumbtacks, is the pencil length. So we'll say 5 here. And you'll see here that there's a little numeric keypad that shows up right when you click into the field box here. You can either use that, or you can simply use your keyboard as well on your computer. So different ways for kids to input answers here. When kids are ready, the next question, you'll see here that this one is multiple selection. So the difference in multiple selection and multiple choice is that multiple selection asks kids to answer one or more questions, one or more answer choices on the question, whereas multiple choice is just one. So that's denoted by either a box or a circle. Circle denotes multiple choice, and the boxes indicate that kids are supposed to select one or more answer choices. So that's the distinction between the two here. And you'll see here that I'm just, guessing at answers just for, time's sake here. The third one is shade in one half of the circle. So kids can pick any two of the pie slices here to denote their answers. It can be, these two, it can be these two. Question number 4 is a multiple choice, once again, indicated by the circle. Go and pick this one. Fill in the blank. Ryan has a list of 20 friends. He already sent out 8 invitations. How many are forthcoming? So 12 is the answer here. This one is called drag and drop. You're asked to indicate which answers show 3:30 on the clock face here. So we can pick this one here, half after 3, and then 30 minutes after 3. And, kids are meant to, once again, take the answer choices and then drag them into the answer box to the right here. And really what's great about Edulastic is that it gives kids practice on these. Some of these may be, you're asked to manually manipulate answers into the boxes. It may be difficult for some of the lower grade kids to really have that hand-eye coordination to manipulate it. So before we get to the state standardized testing, it's always great for kids to do a lot of practice on Edulastic so that when they come to the state test, they're well-versed on how to manipulate answers and drag things and answer some of these questions that they're seeing on the test. This one here is called, once again, it's classification, drag and drop. So we're meant to drag the answers into the fields to the right here. I'll just do this really quickly here. Next question, straightforward multiple choice. Now, I did want to get to one of the options that kids have on the top here. There's a option called crossout. You see where I'm hovering the mouse right now. Crossout is, think of it as an answer eliminator. So by using this tool, what it does is it allows kids to strike answer choices out of contention. So for example, if I know for certain that the answer is not number 5, this allows kids to have a visual indicator that 5 is not to be in contention, nor is 7, and that leaves me with 6 and 8. So crossout is a tool that's on state standardized testing as well, but it allows me to visually eliminate answers from contention. And then the correct answer is B, so I'll go ahead and answer that. And this is a great place for me to also, show everyone what this next tool here. We have a tool called Scratchpad in the Edulastic application, which is a great way for kids to show their work. So by clicking on the Scratchpad icon up on top, Kids can annotate notes. They can use the freehand tool to, write in answers. So let's just say they wanted to show their work on a question. I know that this one doesn't quite align with what I'm showing you, but let's say they were asked to answer, to add these two numbers and show their work. What kids can do is they can freehand draw. They can use they can plot lines. They can use shapes, squares, circles, triangles, rulers, protractors, and they can also use a text box to write in an answer. And what Scratchpad does is it allows teachers to then see the kids' work. So all this work that I'm showing you right now will be available on the teacher side for kids, for the teachers to look at. And then they can, either mark the applicable number of points, or they can adjust the point value depending on whether the work is right or not. So that's something called Scratchpad. And then final question here is fill in the blank. So the answer for this one is 11. And then when I'm ready, I can submit it. There's also a tool called Bookmark. Bookmark is student facing. So if kids are not quite certain if they answer the question correct and they want to come back to it at a later date, they can always bookmark questions, and that will then visually indicate to them that they should check questions, let's say 1, 6, and 7, if they weren't quite sure of their answers the first time around. Okay, so when we're ready, we can go ahead and click submit. And it's a little hidden here, but there's a way for kids to click submit final submission up on the upper right corner right here. And you'll see here that any questions that they've bookmarked will be indicated in yellow. So when I'm ready, I can go ahead and click submit. And as a kid, I'll then see my score, and I can then review the responses to see where I went astray or I really did well in, by clicking review responses. What it allows them to do is it goes from question to question and see how they fared on the question. Now, having looked at that, I did want to say that that ability can't be locked down by teachers. As a teacher, you may not necessarily always want kids to see their answers and the correct answer choices and things after they click submit. You can lock down that visibility on the teacher side, and I'll show you momentarily how to do that. So so that's the student experience in a nutshell. Any questions on what you've seen thus far, feel free to go ahead and input it in the chat. And I'm sure Lauren and Bill are furiously answering those questions as we speak. I'll pause briefly before I jump into the teacher side. Any questions, any burning questions, Lauren, from folks on the line today?
No, Bill's doing a great job covering most of them.
Okay, great. So now let's go to the good stuff. So, I'm sure all of you are, especially if you're new to Edulastic, how do I create my class and how do I start giving assessments on Edulastic? Now, once again, Edulastic is a portal that you can use to, give things like formative assessments, common assessments, summative assessments, some of those higher stakes testing, or you may just want to use it for classroom purposes, things like exit tickets, worksheets, check your understandings, weekly quizzes, things of that nature. We have resources that allow you to do both on Edulastic. So, when you first land into a teacher account, what you want to do is you want to create your first class. So think of class as a unique, period that has unique group of kids. So some of the lower grade teachers probably have just one homeroom class throughout the day. They have the same group of kids and teach all subject areas, whether it's math, science, social studies, or science. Some of the higher grade level teachers, you may have 6 different periods throughout the day, periods 1 through 6, and you teach all the sciences, maybe physics, period 1, chemistry, period 3, and so on and so forth. So once again, think of classes as a unique group of kids throughout the day. And how you create your first class on Edulastic is that you can either click on this new class icon up on top, or you can go into manage class on the left. So there's 2 different ways to get into the same place. I've already pre-populated 3 classes in my account. You'll see here, there's a social science class, there's a science class, and there's a physics class with 3 students in the physics class here. Now, if you wanted to add a 4th class, let's say chemistry, for instance, we can click on new class, and then you'll enter the pertinent information here. So I can say chemistry period 5. Grade would be, normally I believe chemistry is taught in 11th grade in high school. And I can put science as the subject. And then standard set, probably science NGSS, but you can always pick some of the other standard sets that you have available here. And we have standard sets that are aligned to all different state standardized standards, whether you're coming from New Jersey. I think New Jersey uses NJSLSS. Texas uses their own standards, and then we have Common Core as the default for everyone. So then once I enter all my information, I can then save the class and then start adding kids. Now, how do I add kids to my class? Now, the most basic and the easiest way really to do this is by syncing with Google Classroom. So if you're a district that uses Google Classroom, you're really in luck here. It's a really one-stop shop, really easy way to get those rosters from Classroom into Edulastic. You simply click on this Sync with Google Classroom button up on top here. Now, what if you don't use Classroom? Don't fret. There's different ways to add your kids to Edulastic. You can either add them individually, or by clicking the Add Multiple Students tab, you can enter them using their Google usernames or Office 365 usernames. So Google usernames can be their emails that the district gives to them. So let's say I teach in, I'm using this as an example, Los Angeles Unified. What I can do is, what they do is they have lausd.net as their email domains. So you can always, copy and paste those from either a sheet somewhere. And once you paste them into Edulastic, kids can then use single sign-on using Google to get into their accounts. So once again, it's a really easy way for them to log into Edulastic without having to memorize their passwords and things like that. They can just simply use Google single sign-on or Microsoft Office 365 sign-on to get into Edulastic. And for some reason, if your district doesn't give kids emails, and I've seen districts where some of the lower grade kids, like kindergarten and first, don't get emails. What you can do as a teacher is you can always add students individually using a username, which can be things like maybe first name, last name, or first initial, full last name, and then maybe a number. Or you can use their student IDs that the district generates here. And then you can add them individually, and then they'll populate into the class. Just remember that if you use this method, you'll be assigning them a username and password that they need to then track. So, just make sure that they understand what their usernames and passwords are at this point. And that's how you create your first class. So any questions on the class creation process? Once again, feel free to input them into the chat window if you have any. Now, before I move on to assessments and how to create content and things of that nature, I did want to mention that in the managed class area, inside one of your classes, there's also an option to add a co-teacher. So think of a co-teacher as someone that you either maybe an intervention specialist or a SPED teacher or an actual co-teacher that you teach with. You can add those folks to any classes that you create. And what that allows them to do is they can also create assessments. They can also look at the same data that you see and so on and so forth. So clicking the Add Co-Teacher button will then allow you to add a co-teacher by either inputting their names, emails, or usernames. And just remember that these folks need to be in the same district as you are. So whether you teach in Chicago Public Schools or New York, Department of Education, make sure that they are also tethered to the same district that you are. And that way you can add them as a co-teacher to your class. All right, so now I'll jump into, if no questions, I'll jump into how to create content and assessments within Edulastic. And this is the really, the fun stuff that, you as teachers can then start doing, playing around within your accounts after this call today. So there's two ways to create content in Edulastic. So we have a way to, or actually, let me just backtrack really quickly. We have a tab called Library here. Library consists of both the item bank and the test. So the distinction between these two is that think of item bank as a loose repository of all questions in Edulastic. So, as teachers, as you're making assessments, you're also creating content. Those questions that go into assessments will then exist in a place called the item bank. And it's a loose repository of questions that span the gamut from, math, different grade levels, different subject areas, different standards, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, when you first land in the item bank, you'll be inundated with, just a really wide, vast sea of questions here. What I always recommend teachers do is that they filter for their own pertinent information. So if I'm a grade 3 math teacher, for instance, or grade 10 science teacher, for instance, what I want to do is I want to use the filters to really whittle down that list so that I'm getting a targeted list of questions that really pertain to my subject and grade pairing. So right now, to default, right, I have it as grade 3 math. And you'll see here that over 12,000 questions then pop up. So, definitely it's quite a lot to have to pour over. What I additionally recommend is that teachers enter standards. So if I know I'm entering, let's say I'm looking for 3 OA A3 standards, for instance, I can always add those to the list and then further reduce the list to the right here. So now by picking one standard, I have a little over 1,300 questions that I can use. And at this point, really what you need to do is you can view the questions, see what it looks like on the student side of things. And using the plus button, you can add it to your test. So if I know that I'm a grade 3 math teacher looking for 3 OA A3 standards, and let's say the first 5 really meet my needs, I can simply click on the plus sign and then add them to my assessment. And you're not, limited to only one standard. You can always pick multiple standards. Let's say I want to pick three of the different OA standards. I could then add another 2. And once I populate an assessment, you'll see here that now I have 7 items populated. Now that was coming from the item bank. So item bank, once again, a pre-populated repository of all questions in Edulastic that not only come from you as educators creating assessments, but also from some of the collections that we have. These are third-party curriculum providers like Engage NY, Smart Start, Diagnostics, and Edulastic Certified, which is a really great place to start. Edulastic Certified items are ones that have been vetted for the correct rigor, for the correct, that they're really on point for whatever you're looking for. So if you're ever at a loss as to where to start, I really recommend that folks start with the Edulastic Certified Bank. And once again, these are vetted content from not only our in-house subject matter experts, but also from these other curriculum partners that we align with as well. And you'll see here that once you start creating items, you'll always get a running tally of how many items are on the test here. Now, you're not limited to only the item banks, but you can also create your own questions. So let's say I have a question that I've created on a Google Doc or a Word doc of myself that I have created myself, but I want to put that in Edulastic. How do I go about doing that? You can always mix and match Edulastic questions with those that you create yourself. And we call that option the author your own question option. So by clicking the new item thing here, you'll see here that once again, we have a bevy of different questions that you can choose from that, go from writing to passage to highlight to math, graphing, charts, so on and so forth. The most basic and by far the most popular one is multiple choice. So if I want to create a multiple choice question from scratch, what I do is, each box indicates a different question type. I can click on multiple choice And then we can say, we can ask the question, what is the capital of the United States, for instance? And then remember, when you're creating the question, you're also creating the answer key for kids to pick from. So down below is the answer key. So then you can then put it in the options here. So I can say Miami. I can say New York, DC, and let's say Los Angeles as the last one. So this is the answer key. So we'll need to indicate the correct answer, in this case, C, and the point value. So by default, every question in Edulastic is worth 1 point, but you can always, change the point value to anything that you want it to be. So we can make it 2 points, for instance. And then also, when you're creating the question stem itself, you can always, what I like to call jazz it up. So you can make it bold, you can italicize, you can underline, you can add videos. So this is a great way to make it more interactive. If you want kids to watch a YouTube video, for instance, or a Khan Academy video alongside as you're answering the question, you can always add those videos. You can always add images. So let me go ahead and add an image for you to see what that looks like. I can add an image of a map here. And, I can also add tables, charts, bullet points, hyperlinks to other resources outside Edulastic. If you want kids to maybe link to something before they answer the question, that's all available within Edulastic. And then, so having written the question, added an image, and then created my answer key, what does it look like on the student side of things? So if I click on the preview mode up on top, the second tab here, you'll see here that this is exactly what kids will see on their end, and then they can answer it. Let's say I answered it incorrectly. They can check their answer, and you'll see here that the X denotes an incorrect answer. And then lastly, the metadata tab up on top is where you enter the standards. So remember that every question in Edulastic needs to be aligned to a standard. So then you can then easily pick from some of the common core standards here. You can browse, you can look for not only math, but ELA, science, social studies, which we consider the big four, but any other subjects that you teach, whether it's world languages, PE, we have different subject matter teachers that use Edulastic for their own classroom purposes. They're all located within Edulastic. And if you can't find, for some reason, your standards in Edulastic, we can always import them into the system for you. So you just send us a support ticket, and we can easily add those into Edulastic. And then once you've created the, you've added the standards, you can then save your question and then publish it. And you'll see here that we have this test now with 8 items. Remember, 7 that I picked from the item bank, and then 1 that I authored myself. So I can click on this button, and when we're ready, we can then push out this assessment to our kids. The first thing you want to do, and then we work from left to right here. So from description, and then we go from description to add items to review to settings. So the first and foremost thing we want to pick is the name of the test itself. So we can say demo test for today's training, for instance. And then the next tab is a way, if you wanted to add more items to the test, you can, but let's just say we're happy with 8 items as it is. We can then go to the review tab, just do a quick final glance and make sure everything is on the up and up here. If there's, at this point, if there's questions that you want to maybe resequence, let's say, I feel that question number 1 is better served further along. I can just click on this little cross icon and drag it to the position I want. So using the little plus or cross symbol, you can drag things up and down to resequence them in a more the order that you want. And I can outright delete questions. Let's say I decided against using question number 5. I can just go ahead and click on this trash can icon and get rid of it altogether. And then you can also, change point values. I decided question number 3 should carry a little bit more weight. I want to make it worth 5 points, for instance. So think of this as a place where you can then make those little final tweaks to your assessment before you actually either publish it or to assign it out to your class. And off to the right is a really, really great thing. You'll get a quick glance summary of how many questions, how many items are on the test, how many points, but most importantly, which standards they align to. So we have questions that align to all these different standards on the test. And this allows you as a teacher to make sure that you've got the right balance before you push it out. And then lastly is settings. So settings is a way to, the aforementioned, I had mentioned before that you can either lock down the visibility of the scores and correct questions and answers to the kids, or you can, make it available for them. This is a place to do that. So the default is we do not release scores or responses, but if you want them to see the correct answers and the scores, you can just simply click on this radio button here. Some of the other things, there's evaluation method. So all or nothing, this is only pertinent to either multiple choice or multiple selection. So whether it's all or nothing or partial credit, do we want to give partial credit for, some of the incorrect responses? You can do that. And then some of these other things I won't get to because these are actually premium features. Anything denoted with this circle in the yellow box are things that we have available in our premium features. Things like, calculators, being able to shuffle questions and answers, doing a time test, rubrics. These are all available in the premium version of Edulastic. And, that's if you wanted to sign up as a premium account holder. But, I've used Edulastic for a number of years. The free version is more than enough to really just send out an Edulastic assessment, to your kids. So when I'm ready here, I can click on assign. And this is where I pick the class to assign to. So once again, you'll have those classes made before you start assigning assessments. I can push it out to my physics class, science class, or any class, in my roster here. Who do I assign it to? Which kids? By default, it's to all the kids in the class, but you can always just pick specific kids in the group. Let's say only Dave and Laura. But once again, the default is all kids in the class. The next two options are really important. This is really the testing window. So when is my open date and when is my close date? Open date is that, so right when the open date hits, the assessment is made available for kids to take. And the close date, once again, pencils down, they're effectively locked out of the assessment and can no longer proceed. The close date is always 1 week after the open date by default. But once again, by clicking the little drop down, you can always pick any date of your choosing here. A lot of teachers make the test available until the end of the semester even, or the end of the school year. So, you can always pick, let's say, May 31st as the last date to take the test. And then the next tab here is the test behavior. What's the test type? Is it a class or is it practice? Default is class, but if this is a really low stakes, you just want kids to get acclimated using Edulastic, you can always choose the practice assessment. But for the most part, almost always the class assessment is picked. And then once again, some of these other buckets here, anti-cheating, auto redirect, these are all premium features in Edulastic. So when I'm ready, I can simply click assign. And you'll see here that you'll get a success message saying that today's test has been pushed out to your kids and they can start working on it right away.
John, can you just briefly mention what is available? And we've just had some questions in the chat. What's available on the premium side as far as releasing scores goes?
Yes, absolutely. Great question, Bill. So let me go ahead and just jump into that. So I'm going to show folks what some of those features are here. All right. So in premium features, there's quite a few of them here, obviously. So shuffling questions and answers is by far the most popular one. There's a premium feature called requiring a password. So for your higher stakes testing, where you may not want competing classes to share answers with one another, you may want to set a password. So period 1 has a unique password, period 2 has a different unique one, so on and so forth. There's a premium feature called restricting navigation out of the test. So think of this as, there's a feature in Chromebooks called kiosk mode, where you can actually lock kids from jumping on different tabs, on browser tabs, and looking up answers. So, if a kid is taking a test and they jump on a different test and look up Google or look up answers in Wikipedia, for instance, there's a way for teachers to get warned of that kids are actually jumping out of Edulastic and looking up answers. They get a warning and report on their end. So then you can always then, give a heads up to the kid that, we know that you're looking up, answers on different tabs and whatnot. There's also a way for teachers to indicate that the test should be completed in one sitting. So they're not, kids cannot jump in and out of tests, day 1, stop the test and then come back on day 2. They're meant to take it all in one sitting. There's another feature that allows them to do that. And then some of the other premium features are redirect. So redirect is a really important feature. Think of it as a redo. So by using the redirect button, you can then always send back a test for kids to have another attempt at, whether they didn't really give it their full ability on their first attempt, or they inadvertently skipped a question and they clicked submit by accident. You as a teacher can always send them back for another reattempt. So I'll show you what that looks like momentarily. And then finally, miscellaneous, you can set some of the performance bands, the grading scale. You can choose to set them, calculator, whether it's a basic, scientific, graphing calculator on their end. These are all some of the premium features that you can use. Now, I did want to touch upon the assignments and how do I send it back for a redo, or what we call, once again, redirect. So let's say, for instance, in the assignments tab, I click on the live class board. Now, the live class board is really the crown jewel of Edulastic. It's a place that you as a teacher can get a really great quick glance overview on how kids are faring in real time on the Edulastic assessments. So by looking at the live class board, and those of you that have given assessments already have seen this, you can see in real time, indicated by the color code up above. The table is green correct, red is incorrect, yellow is partially correct, and oftentimes you'll have a blue, which is manually graded. So the manually graded what we call open-ended constructed response questions are essay questions, for instance. Those need to be graded by the teacher, him or herself, and then scored before we can complete the test. And you'll see here that on the bar chart up on top, there's this dotted line weaving in and out. What this indicates is the average time spent on the question. So by using this visual indicator, I can see that questions 1 and 8, kids took the longest time in. It could be a more complex or involved question that probably tells me that. Whereas the other questions, they spent on average of between 16 and 34 seconds on. So once again, a great place for you to see, where are kids getting stuck at, or where they're really breezing through the questions, this bar chart up on top. And of course, it tells you how kids are faring. So I can see question number 2 is a sea of red. All kids missed that question, whereas question number 1 is a little bit more easy, and perhaps number 8 as well. And then down below is a place where each card represents one kid in the class. So I can see right off the bat that Brian did the best in the class. He got 60%. And if I want to do a deeper dive into any of the kids, I can always click on view responses and then be taken directly into that kid's performance on the test. So if I wanted to see how Brian did, on the individual questions, I can click on that view responses and then slowly scroll down and see where they, either went astray or they did really well in, and then their point values. And one thing I did want to note is that teachers have full, the power is in your hands to override the scores. Edulastic, we auto grade all question types except for that open-ended constructed response question, which are the essay questions. Those need to be manually graded by the teachers themselves. But for everything else, it's automatically graded. But let's say, for instance, we wanted kids to show their work, but let's say their work didn't quite align with what they answered. You as teachers can always change the point value to something, whether we want to give them more points or less points. Teachers have the power to change the point values. But just note that if you don't choose to opt to use that, you can always just have the system grade the questions and answers. And then going back into the live class board, you can see here that the way to send back an assessment to a kid is to use this feature that we call redirect. So this middle button where I'm hovering, let's say, for instance, Dave and Laura, we want to give them another attempt at it. Their first attempt, they didn't give their best ability, or they skipped some questions by mistake. What I can do is I can click the box to the right of their names and then click redirect. So, and then redirect allows me to pick a new close date. So let's say I want to give them until the same time tomorrow to take this test. I can then click on the calendar, the applicable date, okay it, and then click redirect. And you'll see here that they're now on their second attempt, which is indicated off to the left here. Their first attempt will always stay in the system, but you'll also get their second attempt as well. And then when you're looking at the live class board, you can always toggle between their first attempt, second attempt, or any subsequent attempts within the system. So Edulastic always saves all the attempts of kids, whether it's their first or any other attempt. And then using Edulastic, what you can do is you can always download grades into a CSV file, or you can download responses. So there's a lot of flexibility if you want to manipulate this assessment into a greater spreadsheet that you're using. You can always download the scores, the grades, and the responses for that purpose.
And now we're going to open up the questions.
John, I was busy watching the chat. I wasn't watching your work, but there's a couple of questions about the reports in Edulastic. And if you've already talked about the live class board reports, could you maybe mention something about the insights reports that are premium features?
Absolutely, Bill. So let me go ahead and share my screen with folks. So, Bill touched upon the reports. So, one of our strong suits in Edulastic is the reporting feature, and we have that all in a place called Insights. Now, with the free accounts, there's one report available at your disposal, and this is the one called Standards Gracebook. So it shows you a summary of all the standards that you've given throughout the course of the school year and how kids are doing on that. Now, there's also a plethora of different other reports. You'll see here that there's, single assessment report, multiple assessment report, standards report. And what these do is that they give you a deeper dive into things like subgroup performance, whether you're trying to assess different demographic data, whether it's FRL or ELL students, or, male versus female, race, things like that, that can be made available for premium users. Or you want to delve into how kids are doing on specific questions on the test or question types. So, let's say I gave a test with 10 questions and I see that almost all the kids bombed question number 1. That can indicate to me that that question either wasn't done very well, or maybe there's a mistake in the answer key, for instance, or something of that nature. I can then use these reports to either throw away those questions or not use it on subsequent tests. Response frequency tells me which question types are either kids doing really well in or not so well in, whether it's multiple choice or essay or any of that. And then performance by standards, another premium report that tells me which standards on the test and how kids are faring on that. And then lastly, performance by students. It's really a histogram of how kids are doing within the test itself. All of my kids are, most of them are getting questions 1 and 6 correct, and then things of that nature. Now, if you wanted a deeper dive to explain, if you're thinking of, perhaps, getting on board with a premium account and you want to know exactly what these reports do, I do highly recommend that teachers go to our Edulastic channel on YouTube. So if you go on YouTube, Edulastic, and type in premium reports, we will then have a great summary of what each and every one of these reports does. And then you can then, at your leisure, look at the videos and determine whether these will be of added value to you as a teacher, perhaps using a premium account. So once again, I do recommend that you go to our YouTube channel, type in premium reports, and each and every single one of these different reports will then be summarized in a video.
This came up a few times in the chat, John, and Bill answered it wonderfully, but maybe just bring it up for everyone to see. I know you really touched on redirect, but just kind of discuss how redirect is used for those students that are absent one day and need to take an assessment that was given that day.
Sure, yes. So redirect is a great option. If, let's say, for instance, we have a testing window where, we open the test right now and then it closes at 5 p.m. today. But for some reason, the kid didn't get to it before the close date. So redirect is a way for you to send it back for another attempt. So it's really just a way for you to, if they miss the testing window, for instance, you can always give it back to them for another attempt. Or, for whatever reason, if you, once again, I mentioned this before, is that if you feel like they didn't give it their best shot, they were just guessing at the answers, for instance, you can always redirect it back to them for another attempt. Or they inadvertently skipped a question, they just didn't, they missed out on question number 3, but they click submit by accident. Remember that once you click submit, it's considered a final submission. You can always redirect it back to them. So really a lot of different scenarios for you to redirect, assessments back to kids.
Here's a question that came in. If a student switches classes in the middle of the term, would the scores stay with the student?
Yes, that was a great question. Thank you, Sam Lee, for that question. Yes, the data and the scores stay with the kids. So they move from period A to B, for instance, or even move to a different teacher within the school itself. Scores and data will always link back to the student.
Thank you, John and Bill, for being with us today, for the wonderful presentation, and for answering all the flood of questions that came into the chat and the Q&A box. And to all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate all that you do, and feel free to reach out with any questions you have about Edulastic